Welcome to Dark Side of the Moon.
Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Vincent Green.
I'm your host, Noel John Toohey.
We got Cara Mack in the back. This is Dark Side of the Moon. Let's get to motherfuckers. And I nearly said the other. Yeah. All right, folks, we're back with another episode. And this time we're back again with Will Johnson. Will, I'm dragging you through the murky waters of the MCU. First, I brought you through The Incredible Hulk with Don Shanahan. This time I was like, I'll give Don a break. I'll bring him back for an awesome movie. But Will, I said, I'll punish you a little bit more. Just a smidgen more. And I brought you back for Iron Man 2. Will, thanks for coming back, man. Really happy to see you. And what did you make of Iron Man 2? And how do you think it's aged over the past decade or so?
Well, to cut right to it, I mean, there would be no MCU without this film. Yeah. What I find amazing about this film is it's hard to believe this is the third film in the MCU because there is such a built-in quality already to it. It feels like some of the phase 2 films already, or even phase 3, because like Nick Fury just feels like it feels like he's been there forever, Yeah. Black Widow comes in and fits in seamlessly,
deliciously.
The continuing arc of Tony feels very lived in is the thing. Like if you
the world feels established.
Yeah, he is Iron Man now.
There's no awkward sophomore step with the character, where you're maybe trying to fix any errors from the first one, even though there really isn't any because that film's perfect.
Yeah, but great movie.
But it feels like, I know film people are going to be mad that I say this.
Cinema.
But it feels like a mid season 2 episode of a show. It doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like an ongoing, kind of like how I've also compared that with the Lethal Weapon films. Lethal Weapon 4 to me feels like, oh, this is episode 3 of season 5 of Lethal Weapon. It feels so lived in and comfortable, and it helps you accept the idea that these different pieces and different parts from different movies can exist together, and they can still be their own thing. Because Iron Man 2 is its own story.
Completely
it's not connected to the giant world of Marvel, but it also has these connections that brings that world together. So in that sense, Iron Man 2 is an immense success and would be a blueprint for how to build this universe.
Yeah.
That said, the story on its own, like the Iron Man 2 story, where it's just the Tony Stark story, is kind of all over the place, and it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's disjointed.
It's not as tight as Iron Man 1. And it would, in terms of how it's aged, yes, it seems a little bit, not counting all the universe connections, in terms of Tony's story, this seems like a minor step. Iron Man 1 and 3 and then all the Avengers movies, they feel like you're making monumental steps with Tony Stark. This one feels like, oh, he's kind of dying of a thing. And I mean, it does have, we'll get to it later, but it does have probably one of my favorite moments of any Tony Stark moment involving his father. But overall, it does just feel like a misadventure for Tony Stark as opposed to a monumental step forward or backward for him.
It feels to me like a complete, the sequel trope or something I said to you before we start recording. Is we got to go bigger. We had one robot, we need 15 robots.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's this guy's from his past, we need a guy that's even deeper, darker from his past. It's just kind of we need to up the ante constantly, and they were doing that throughout the movie. And a lot of times when you're just focusing up in the ante from the original, you kind
just
of
for the point of, just for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly. It loses that kind of, as you said, kind of direction in terms of its narrative.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to let's make this bigger, let's make this bigger, let's do this and let's do this. And sometimes you just need to okay, we need to make it a personal story again, because that's what worked was the first time. So we need to find someone from the past. So they find Ivan Vanko, it's not his name. So they find him. You don't need to go necessarily bigger with the story. You can just have similar elements, and you don't need 15 drones to make the action sequence at the end bigger. You just need someone that is as equal intellectually as Tony, and that's what Ivan proved to be. He just didn't have the same technology or the same guidance at a younger age that Tony did. So that's what Tony was like, you should double your cycles, and straight away he did, like, you know what I mean? It's like, I think that character, like, they should have shown the more intellectual side, and I think if you shed some of the bigger or better, the so-called bigger or better in air quotes, then you can have a chance to really delve into him, develop him as a character, and show that he's a true equal to Tony. He just is an equal in a very different way than like Justin Hammer or an Obadiah Stane from the first movie, you know?
Well, even that is the inherent flaw, and you can forgive it in the first one. And I'm a huge Iron Man 3 guy. I don't know how you guys feel. I love Iron
Trash
Man 3.
movie.
No, I didn't like it, to be honest.
Boo!
I think it's, I mean, I'm a Shane Black guy. All his movies are 5 stars to me. They're amazing.
Apart from The Predator, Iron Man 3.
I didn't hate, but it's not a 5-star movie. But if there is one flaw that they could never fix with Tony Stark, and it's carried over into the Spider-Man movies too, because to me, Iron Man 2, Spider-Man Far From Home are weaker entries in the MCU to me.
Yeah. Thor Dark World as well.
Because if there's one thing that they've repeated in at least 4 movies, so Iron Man 1, 2, 3, and Spider-Man No Way Home, is it's always somebody that Tony dicked over in his past that comes back to haunt somebody. Like, in the first one, it's Obadiah Stane is literally the enemy from within.
Yeah.
Iron Man 2, you've got what's his name?
Ivan Vanko, is it?
You've got Vanko, literally. You've got Hammer, who like wants to be Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3, you got Killian, the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Real Mandarin.
Yeah.
In this case, the terrorist named after an orange, as
or a language, depending on what way you want to view it.
And then this is the bizarre part about Spider-Man Far From Home, and I keep wanting to say No Way Home because I've just been in the mode. But
You're thick of it now.
Not only do you have Jake Gyllenhaal, Mysterio, being literally dicked over by Tony Stark, but they even bring back. This drove me nuts. They even bring back the box of scraps guy. Like the sidekick to Mysterio, you know, like the guy that Obadiah Stane yells at for one scene in Iron Man 1. He's an integral villain now. Like, so it's almost like ridiculous to the point that like anybody Tony Stark. Oh, you know what? And I just thought of another one. Even in Civil War. Tony's whole arc is spurred on by the fact that this woman's like, hey, you fucking killed my son, even though you didn't literally kill him. I'm not saying that it's like
very retroactive in his storytelling.
Winter Soldier fucked him over in the past, so it's the same thing. They just did it the other way around.
That's true. So this is what inevitably happens in any connected universe. It's kind of the thing of like how like in Friends, which I hate, eventually they're all going to sleep with each other and all have relationships with each other. You know, it's going to get to the point. It's not quite as bad as I've heard on other shows, like with Spider-Man 3, where everybody's standing next to each other, knows each other in some way, even though it's New York City, you know? But that's that I know Don doesn't like. He doesn't like how everyone's connected in New York City. Like 6 people know each other, even though it's a city full of 8 million people. But I'm not going to say it's lazy, but it is
convenient.
Too convenient. Like I would like, you know, they touched a little bit on it in Infinity War, like where, you know, Stark is so renowned on Earth that even Thanos knows who he is. You know, you're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they kind of are natural enemies because they have these goals and they're this legendary across the universe, but they never met. Like that makes more sense to me. Someone would hear about Tony Stark and maybe like Hammer is probably the closest because he literally wants to be Tony Stark. He's got the dancing, the suits, and the technology. So it makes more sense if someone is inspired by or affected by Tony Stark as opposed to being directly linked to his past.
Yeah, good point.
Being his enemy. You know what I mean? That is, if there's anything I can find that is, it has to be like Killian in Iron Man 3 is pissed off because Tony Stark was like, yeah, I'll meet you on the roof, and he doesn't. Where it's like, okay, yeah, dude, you got, dicked over for one night for 1 second by a super celebrity that you had barely a chance to talk to. That's fine. You don't need to create an evil empire.
Yeah.
For it. And then, like I said, in No Way Home, Jesus, Far From Home. I can understand Jake Gyllenhaal being mad, but the guy that worked for Stark that gets yelled at once, he's like, I'm going to help take over the world. It just gets more convoluted as it goes on. So,
and do you think that's a case of like the more you expand your universe, like when you're expanding your universe outward, right? The only way to create connections to the pre-existing universe is retcon. Like that's why, like, you know what I mean? You're constantly having to retcon. Like you have to retroactively go back and change the continuity, because the bigger the universe gets, the more and more tenuous these connections are to the villains. If you want to make the stories more personal, like, because like that's what Marvel does. Each villain, even like Batman less so, or DC sometimes less so, but each villain in Marvel seems to have this personal link with its superhero before they can do battle.
Yes, and this is why I'm a little excited for not a little. I'm very excited, but this is why I think.
Hello, Peter.
Phase 4 is going to be very interesting, because they are going. I mean, if you look at all the stuff that's come out in Phase 4 so far, everything seems. I am struggling to see how they're all going to connect everything together, because we have gotten so many different, disparate strands of the Marvel universe in Phase 4. You've got the street level stuff. You've got Hawkeye and Falcon and Winter Soldier, right?
Yeah.
Those are very like Earth-based, grounded, isolated, minor threats, right?
Yeah.
Hawkeye, you got the Tracksuit Mafia. Falcon, Winter Soldier, you've got whatever it was called, the
Flag Smashers.
The Flag Smashers.
Yeah.
So, that's very isolated, very specific to like the world or just a country. But then you've got Loki, which is like literally like ripping apart the fabric of the universe.
Yeah.
You've got Shang-Chi, which not only introduces now realms within a universe, like you have an alternate dimension within Earth. So that brings up a whole new thing, like
magic and mysticism.
Yeah. But also they have this thing about how the rings have come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you've got
the Scarlet Witch is a big one as well.
You've got this multiverse of madness. You got Scarlet Witch tearing the fabric of reality. They have managed to do what happened in Phase 1 through 3 was very logical step forward. They've called it the Infinity Saga. It leads up to Thanos. It makes sense. Like there's kind of a logical bridge, and they slowly brought everybody together. Now the universe is wide open, and I have no freaking clue how they're going to tie this in. Like how is Sam Wilson, Captain America, Hawkeye, Shang-Chi, and Loki all going to, like by the end of the Infinity Saga, the fact that we were watching a movie that had a talking raccoon in it, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, like all these disparate pieces that seem so far-fetched would come together and make complete sense.
Yeah.
Like it makes complete sense. Like there's no moment where I'm like, well, this is a talking tree talking to a 90-year-old, Hydra assassin. Like it all made sense. This one, and Kevin Feige I trust, but we are entering a very exciting period. A lot. This is during the time when a lot of cinema people are saying like, this is all redundant and it's all cut and paste and it's all the same thing. But I'm telling you, this phase, I have had a very unique experience with every project that's come out of Phase 4. Like every single one has had a different feeling, has had a different ambiance to it, a different environment. Like I've never felt like, if there's one thing I don't like about Phase 1 of the MCU, is that they do that's one that felt cut and paste, because it was like origin Avengers, and it was kind of like, okay, yeah, I
think it was a necessary evil though, wasn't it? The origin story,
Absolutely. But I'm saying like the current criticisms going on about the MCU about how they're being like, they're the same thing over and over again and things like that. Like I can see that maybe 10 years ago. Yeah. But now everything is so, and I forgot Eternals. Eternals is a whole different
And time travel. They introduced time travel with the whole
Infinity War
thing, Infinity War. So
Quantum Realm.
So there's nothing. There is nothing that you can say is beyond the scale. There's nothing at all.
I think Kevin Feige mentioned something before about he was thinking of maybe splitting it. Like he said, you have the roster, as Will pointed out, you have the more street-bound people, something that's on the lines of like a Falcon Winter Soldier, maybe Spider-Man is kind of like the apex of that. But you have like,
Spider-Man would be apex street level. Yeah, but exactly. Spider-Man moves like a Superman. You know what I mean? Like Spider-Man's actual power set.
I think Kevin Feige though alluded to something like he wanted to split the roster in half and have some of them fight more celestial kind of enemies and others fight more earthbound. So like you probably might have a young Avengers on Earth, and then you might have Sword or something and then you'll have like maybe have like the really overpowered people like Captain Marvel. They'll fight like Titans or whatever out in space, and you'll have like the hierarchy of the top level villains like a Sinister Six will go against maybe like a Young Avengers or something along the lines of that.
That's all fine and good, and I believe in that. However, before his revelation in Loki, we knew that Jonathan Majors was going to play Kang because he was cast in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So that begs the question. So, because to me, like if you've noticed, the three characters I think I told you guys off the recording that are my favorite are more street level guys. I love Ant-Man, Hawkeye, and Wilson. So how the hell is Ant-Man going to fight Kang? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, so far Ant-Man has, what really drew me to those movies is even though they're part of the universe, like you said, they were very isolated within, like...
They were insular. They were quite insular, yeah.
That's why Edgar Wright left the movie in the first place, because he wanted to do his own thing. They wanted to have this kind of... It be a place of the Marvel Universe. Because even though it is insular, it does have very wide...
It has to be a building block.
The Pym particle, the introduction to the Pym particle into the MCU has such huge after effects.
And there's a lot of tension with him and S.H.I.E.L.D. and Stark and stuff like that. But what I like about those is, Ant-Man is fighting. First, he's just fighting essentially like an industry rival, like who wants to create his own Ant-Man suit. And then
very like Tony Stark.
With some connections to 10 Rings, by the way. If you know Ant-Man, there's a gentleman that's going to buy the cross tech that has the 10 Rings.
The yellow jacket suit.
Yeah, the people that are going to buy that are indicated that it's the 10 Rings, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Nice little nod there. But then in the second one, it's you've got two villains, and one's not really a villain. One is a girl who, kind of Ghost, who's kind of a victim of
circumstance.
An anti-hero or something in the middle. The gray. She's in the gray.
Like a full villain.
Yeah.
And then you've got some mafia guys. It's very insular. So when I found out that Ant-Man's going to be fighting Kang now, I'm like, okay.
But the quantum realm, you open up the quantum realm, Kang can operate in any kind of...
That kind of... and I'm sure it'll make sense. Like I said, to me, Kevin Feige is 30-0 right now. He's undefeated. He's done everything he can do.
Yeah.
I'm okay with him. Even Age of Ultron, which I don't like. I think he's fine. And they've hinted at... They what Marvel's really good at, and this is why Iron Man 2 works really well, is they find ways to slowly build in how all these characters connect. Like in Loki, when they go to, what was the realm called that they got sent to when they got, I'm forgetting all my words today. When they would get blasted by the little rod thing, they'd go to that timeless zone in the middle of space.
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it was called. But they met all the other Lokis and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, they have a scene in there. A lot of fun little callbacks, like they have the Thanos copter from the comics in there and things like that. But there's actually a moment when you're kind of in Kang's universe or whatever, where
you get pruned.
Pruned. When you get pruned, you go to that space. There's actually a scene where they have an overhead shot. Not only do you see a Kang tower, like that is Tony Stark's, the Avengers place, but it's Kang. Yeah. But there's actually a giant Yellow Jacket helmet that's just sitting around. It's huge. It's like the size of man. So it's like they put these little things in where you can be like, oh yeah, I can see how that. Now I can see. continuous connection between Ant-Man and Kang. And back to Iron Man 2, they do stuff like that where, like, you know, Coulson will be like, here, use this. It's Captain America's shield, which doesn't make
it doesn't make sense. No.
Continuity wise, but he's like, here, use Captain America's shield. And, you know, Tony will look at it and go, whatever.
To me,
and,
that was a prototype. I think that might be a prototype for the shield.
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, it's stuff like that where they've thrown in little things to build the world. I think that's why Iron Man 2 is a success in overall, because by the end of this movie, not only am I seeing Iron Man and War Machine work together, which at the time, you know, post Avengers were spoiled, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we're like, holy crap.
Yeah, that was cool.
Iron Man working together. Not only am I convinced that I can see multiple heroes on the screen work together, but I'm also seeing little building blocks built into how this universe shakes out. And like I said, I'm already good with S.H.I.E.L.D. They've thrown in little references at the end, like, for instance, they show clips from Incredible Hulk at the end.
Thunderbolt Ross.
Like, yeah, they throw, like, for instance, when Tony is at the end, when he's with Nick Fury and they're talking about the Avengers Initiative.
Yeah.
There's videos of the Hulk university.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's a map on the wall, and it says, and it has a kind of dot on it, like, you know, a Google Earth dot or whatever, and it says Wakanda.
I didn't spot that. I watched it like an hour ago, and I didn't spot that. So.
It has a map of Africa, and it very specifically says Wakanda, and there's like notices of it because they're starting to suspect stuff. Like, you get the idea that Nick Fury is building this team. It's not just like, oh, and now Thor's here. You know, it's more like there is actual connections here that they're building. And if anything, like, that's why I'm saying there would be no MCU without Iron Man 2, because it's beginning that seamless transition of building that universe.
Yeah, because by the end of it, you have Black Widow, you have War Machine, you have Thor's hammer, and you have Hulk. It being
S.H.I.E.L.D. is well established now.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. This like even sped up the process. You know, the first film was very slow. They had the end scene. He meets up with Nick Fury. But in the second one, you're absolutely right. It was just like the Avengers Initiative is about to happen, guys. We are just about to kick it off. So yeah, it does become a very important film. I think if you were to bullet point this film and say, oh, it's about, you know, evil scientist and, you know, you're going to have War Machine and blah, blah, blah. I think somebody go, oh, that sounds like a cool film. I think the only thing I'm disappointed, I just didn't like the execution. You know, just the it factor. Like you said, it wasn't as tight as Iron Man 1, but there's a great deal of room between how great Iron Man was. You don't have to be that good, but it fell off.
Too many moving parts.
Yeah.
Iron Man 1 is Tony gets kidnapped. Right, so pretty much we introduce Tony, shows us what his lifestyle is like. He gets kidnapped, he escapes from kidnap, he invents the Iron Man suit, he fights Obadiah Stane, and the movie's over.
Yeah.
And that's Iron Man 1 broke down to its bare minimum. And this is like, you reintroduce Iron Man, you have the Senate hearings, then you have the background with Ivan Vanko, then you have his relationship with Justin Hammer, then you have his relationship with Pepper Potts, you have his relationship with James Jordy Rhodes. Like, all these things add up to a lot of moving parts. And if you want to tell a seamless story, you're going to have to wrap them all up individually. Yeah. And sometimes the
Truey's drinking problem in there.
Kind of like...
that was kind of wedged in.
I think that the poor critical reaction to this film did end up having some things excised. Like I, for one, I know that he does come back in a very small cameo in All Hail to the King, which is that one-shot short film with Ben Kingsley. Have any of you guys seen that?
Yeah.
It's on. Yeah, it's kind of like what happened to the Mandarin, you know, when he was in prison.
That was Marvel's apology, really, though, wasn't it? Sorry, guys. Exactly. We're sorry, guys.
Yeah, but so Hammer does show up in that, like he's in prison with the Mandarin, with Ben Kingsley.
Yeah.
But
Trevor Slattery.
I think that Trevor Slattery. I think he ended up being a casualty of the critical response because they were like, okay, maybe it was too much. We don't want to bring Hammer back because.
Because even when he was getting arrested, he was given one of those almost like Shredder with the turtles in the 80s cartoon. I'll be back.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to be in another film.
I would have preferred Hammer to come back instead of Guy Pearce's character in Iron Man 3, and then we could have closed the loop.
Magneto was in all of the X-Men films, and it kind of annoyed me. You know, there was such a deep roster of bad guys.
Yeah.
So you can't. I don't like it when
Hashtag Mephisto.
Yeah. Yeah. So just leave it the fuck alone. You know, although they fucked up Apocalypse and stuff. So
Well, I think we got blessed though with Magneto because it got cast by two world-class actors.
absolutely
Like Ian
absolutely
McKellen and Michael
arguments
Fassbender.
there. No arguments. There.
Which is crazy. Michael Fassbender makes so much shit. But back to Iron Man 2, seamless transition. Pa 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 pa. But what did you make of? I'll throw it to you, Noel, and then I'll give it to Will. But what did you make of Mickey Rourke coming in? And as I like to say to you, Will, he's peak Mickey Rourke in this. And what did you make of his casting as Ivan Vanko? He was kind of on the rise at that stage. We had The Wrestler, he had the Oscar buzz, Sin City, all
this
that
was
kind
his
of jazz.
second act. I'd like to maybe get some Russians to play some Russians. Or something, you know?
Hire a Russian dude.
Yeah, just hire a Russian dude. I mean, they had Ray Winston play a Russian. That's unforgivable. He had such a Cockney accent, and he was like trying. But I like Whiplash as a character, and I was glad, you know. Sorry, what's the actor's name?
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, I was glad. I remember being happy that he got it. I just thought his character was so tropey that there was nothing about him I really liked. But I don't think that was Mickey Rourke's fault.
I want my
you know,
blood.
you can only work with the script that you have.
Yeah.
I just thought he was blasé. His death meant nothing to me. He's low.
Because they didn't develop him right. Remember?
They just didn't develop him right.
That's what I
so
said
again,
earlier,
I
yeah.
think he's a victim of the film as opposed to being what was wrong with it. You know, like a really
Very
flat actor or something like that.
He's a very
you know?
compelling character to me, I think.
I think so. Like you were saying, this was kind of the second act for Mickey Rourke. He had done a number of films that had, I'm not sure the chronology off the top of my head. I don't have one of Vinny's Mickey Rourke cheat sheets in front of me.
Well, you mocked my cheat sheets out of existence, man.
I remember, you know, there was, you know, with Sin City, with Domino, with The Wrestler.
Yeah.
You know, he started to kind of make this comeback where it was like, okay, Mickey Rourke he is a good actor. You know, like they had him in these very interesting roles, and they kind of played up his kind of, it was kind of this perfect mix of his celebrity with the character, like, you know, in The Wrestler and even in like Domino, like it's always kind of these guys that have been through it, had a lot of success, have fallen, and are trying to claw back into it.
Very like Robert Downey Jr. himself.
Yeah, like Robert Downey Jr. was himself, although Robert Downey Jr. It turned out to be seamless. You know, he just arrived with Iron Man, you know?
Well, because he's playing himself in a lot of ways. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just an exaggerated version of himself.
And I think that it got to the point where he was kind of maybe not a celebrity on the level of an RDJ or something, but it got to the point where he was back to, you're an actor, you're no longer an actor for hire, you're an actor who gets to make choices.
Yes.
And I know it's not like for instance, another great example would be like something like Russell Crowe or something. Okay.
Amazing actor.
Russell Crowe started doing his career. He was hired because of his intensity and stuff, but he still was subject to the stuff that was offered to him, like, you know, virtuosity or something, right?
Yeah.
A good year.
Eventually he got to the point where he became such a renowned actor and a powerful person that he could pick his own projects, and for better or worse, that led to his career. Mickey Rourke was at that stage again, I think, where it was kind of like, we're not getting Mickey Rourke just because of name value. Like, he's actually an actor. He's going to give us options. You know, he's going to make choices.
Yeah.
I think they let him have free reign on this one because they're like, well, this is Mickey Rourke. He's an Oscar nominee. He's back. You know?
Yeah.
And he made some choices that I think, like you said, it's about the script, but I also think that there was a lot of him going, well, I'm Mickey Rourke now. I'm going to make this decision.
It's
like,
how you interpret the script.
I'm going to have a bird. You know, like, you know,
I want my bud.
and I think that you know, I think Whiplash is an interesting. He's definitely a phase one villain because
100%.
100%.
he doesn't feel like too like. I don't feel like. It's almost hard for me to believe that the universe that has Thanos has Whiplash in it. Like,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
he's part of the universe, but he does feel like this bizarre offshoot idea that they were like, okay, we're not going to do something like this again. You know what I mean? It feels very, it just, I don't know how to explain. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it just feels very peculiar.
Inconsequential. He was inconsequential.
Yep. And I also feel that Mickey Rourke is not.
He's like mid-season filler.
Yeah. And I also don't think that he's in the same movie as some of the other people sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I think I agree.
One thing I liked about Iron Man 2 was probably the last time Marvel had a bit of edge to them in a lot of ways. I know, now, don't get me wrong, Black Widow's backstory is fucking traumatic as fuck.
Yeah.
It's one of the darkest aspects of the whole Red Room, her forced hysterectomy, all these things, forced sterilization. Like, that's dark as fuck. But I just think, like, outside of a lot of that, we don't really get a lot of edgy stuff from Marvel. But this, you had, like, Mickey Rourke, like, blowing dudes up, breaking guys' necks, hanging guys from ceilings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's it. You know, when Black Widow goes into...
Yeah.
She thinks she has him, and she goes into the room, and there's just two guys hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
That is quite dark by Marvel standards.
You know what I mean, though? Like, so I just think he was, even though he is really, when you look at the bag and bones of the MCU and what it's developed as, he's a very inconsequential character, especially since he died. He's a one-off and one and done or whatever. But if you look at the tone of the character, and I think if you tone down other aspects and really concentrate on him as a villain, he's much darker than Obadiah Stane and how he went about his methods, blowing people up, killing people, escaping from prison, dealing with Justin Hammer, double-crossing even the villain, because they built it like Justin Hammer was going to be the major villain of the piece. But in the end, it was Ivan Vanko outsmarted everybody, even outsmarted Tony, because he used his own hubris against him. Because Tony's like, I'm going to give this information to a man because he's a dead man. He might as well be dead. He's going to be locked up in prison forever. And he pretty much gave him the keys to upgrading his own technology and actually making him a real threat, because he was never a real threat on the racetrack. He was just a nuisance. He's like, you lose, Stark, you lose, because I made you bleed. If you make a god bleed, he was only there to do a show. He never knew, he never thought he was going to win. But Tony gave him the chance of actually defeating him in the climax, because he gave him the keys to the kingdom in a lot of ways by telling him about upcycling his rotations or whatever the fuck. Like, and I just think that even though he ends up being inconsequential, I think he was actually had a lot of potential as a character. And Mickey Rourke was in his heyday, his second heyday, if you want to say, because I know the early 90s, late 80s was kind of like more of his heyday in a lot of ways. But I think if you look at the character and the actor they attached to the role, they could have done a lot more, and especially with Sam Rockwell, they could have used him as a better foil, I think, of playing him off him and having that soldier villain and the cerebral villain. You know, you could have done that kind of way.
The MCU had some growing pains, obviously, in terms of building the universe. They thankfully avoided what I call the Darth Maul problem, which is, you know, and there's a lot of things wrong with the prequels of Star Wars, but I think the first major mistake Episode 1 made was killing off Darth Maul.
Spoilers.
Because it created this gap where each, like, because in the original Star Wars, you got Vader through all three.
The root of two that really screws them over.
So when you killed Darth Maul, you're like, that's a great ending for Obi-Wan, but it created this vacuum where every movie was trying to make up for the Darth Maul factor by having like a Count Dooku or General Grievous or something, and they never could make up that ground. I think MCU had that problem in the beginning, but what happened was a couple of things happened. Like a couple of things happened where they went, oh crap, we really messed up. Like Mickey Rourke, perhaps, you know, inconsequential in the end.
Yeah. The Mandarin was infuriating.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I like the Mandarin. But
they made up for it, though. No, he means like the Trevor Slattery.
Ben Kingsley, Iron Man 3 Mandarin.
No, not like Tony Leung. He's an amazing, like the new iteration of the Mandarin.
Awesome.
He was awesome.
I'm just talking about the.
I like the Shane Black twist Iron Man 3, but that's a story for another day.
God damn you, William.
It's like a couple of things accidentally fell into their lap. Because, like I said, you can throw away Jeff Bridges, you can throw away Mickey Rourke, perhaps. You know, Incredible Hulk, you know, whatever, Abomination, you can throw them away.
Tim Roth. Yeah.
What was this? First, they had Loki and Thor, and they were like, okay, wait a minute. There's a benefit to keeping this character alive, because you knew he was going to be alive.
You can develop him.
And then I think that they got an exceptional, and this is why you should have me on this episode, and you not, you bastards. Red Skull is such a success.
Yeah.
In Captain America, and when they kill him,
yeah,
they bring him back eventually, but when they kill him, they were kind of like, oh crap, like think about all the movies we could have had with Red Skull going up against Captain America. And I think they went, okay, we cannot make this mistake again. So you'll start noticing, there'll be a couple of, like, Guardians of the Galaxy introduces Ronan, kind of dispatch him, and Yellow Jacket, whatever, and Ant-Man. But they start adding more complex problems to the characters that go beyond just villainy, you know?
Like Killmonger.
Like Killmonger, Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier becomes a tipping point for the whole universe. And then they realize, like, you can't have, like, if they did Captain America, this is where they could have made a mistake. If they did Captain America the Winter Soldier and they kill off Winter Soldier at the end, I think the universe would go into a spiral, because you're starting to lose that complexity of character, that complexity of villain. You'll start noticing that
Shades
all the
of grey. It becomes too black and white.
Right. A lot of the villains end up having more connections to the heroes. They end up living more. I know that in the end, like, you know, most of them are dead, but I think that the fact that they live for multiple movies or spur on a change, like Killmonger, I think had to die in Black Panther for his character arc to be effective.
Yeah.
But his death is so impactful on the main character that it will influence his actions going forward.
Exactly.
So
he's left his stamp. He's definitely left his stamp.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think the reason we didn't get to see a Red Skull reappearing in the sequels is because it's well known that the actor who played Red Skull in Captain America: First Avenger, Hugo Weaving from Lord of the Rings, Matrix, all this, he said he hated playing the role. He hated the prosthesis that made the mask. He didn't want to come back. And do you think that's a case of we don't know who we're going to recast this until Ross Marquand from The Walking Dead comes along, who's an expert impressionist. Nailed it. But an expert impressionist, and he comes along, and they are able to recast the role much longer. You can reincorporate Red Skull and Vormir. Is it Vormir? Yep. But you can reincorporate him later on. I think it's just happenstance that you got a Ross Marquand later on down along the road, that he's able to recreate this kind of voice or whatever. And the reason we didn't get Red Skull is kind of taken out of Marvel's hands is because you just had an unwilling actor in Hugo Weaving.
I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that would be a problem for first of all, because you have the prosthetics, which can mask that a little bit. But also, if there's anything Phase 1 is known for, it's that within the first 3 movies, they had major casting changes. So, I mean, just Iron Man 2 alone, we got Don Cheadle replacing Terrence Howard.
Edward Norton being replaced as the Hulk.
Edward Norton was eventually a few years later. So I don't think that would have been a problem. I think that they wrote themselves in a hole because they wanted to. I mean, in the comics, Red Skull is still alive somehow through all this shit. I mean, even though he's a World War II villain.
Yeah.
So
Serum's good enough answer for me. If someone says, "How's he still alive?" Super Serum.
I think that they decided to just take that one on the chin and go, "Okay, we killed him off. We probably shouldn't have done that, but
bring Bucky back.
Let's bring Bucky back. Let's have that be an ongoing story.
Yeah.
Let's keep Winter Soldier as this ongoing issue for Captain America throughout all his movies and all his arcs, and that'll keep the stuff alive because." In very Phase 1 tradition, you know, I love the first Avenger. I think it's a marvelous film. It is an origin story, and in regards to the entire universe, you know, Winter Soldier on is kind of where we get the Captain America that we all know and love. Yeah, you know, just getting the introduction to him in the first one. In the end, First Avenger doesn't play a whole lot into the universe. It plays a lot into Captain America. So
yeah, it tells us a lot about his motives and his motivations as a character and what shapes him. You know, the world that he came from and the way he views. Like when you go to Winter Soldier, when Nick Fury brings him below and he shows him the secret base. And he's talking about, like, you know, the world he came from was good versus evil. Now you're operating in this kind of weird, shadowy realm. And, like, what did he say back where I came from? A person had to commit the crime before they got punished or something like that, or something along those lines. And, like, nowadays it's like you're trying to actually, like, figure out what the crime may be before it's even committed, so you can actually avert the crime.
Proactive, not really.
Yeah, like Minority Report,
Yeah, it's and he says, I think in Winter Soldier, he says this isn't, I don't know the exact line, but I think he says something like, this isn't protection, this is fear. Yeah. You know, this is your fear projected onto, you know, and of course that ends up playing away against them. You know, they have to solve that whole problem because Captain America is always right. Hashtag Hydra. so I think they learned to go back to it. I think a lot of the stuff that happened in phase 1, it's almost, I hate to, go on DC about this, but it feels like, actually, let me do a different comparison. I don't want to do a DC comparison. So that's not fair. It is fair, but I don't want to rile anybody up. But did anyone play Mass Effect?
Yes, all three of them. Amazing.
Okay. All right. The first Mass Effect game, brilliant game. Okay. Yeah. It had some technical issues. I think the what was that thing called on the planet? The Mako, was a pain in the ass, and some of the shooting mechanics were off and stuff like that. And there was some dialogue options that were a little weird, and it seemed like there was only like a set amount of things you could do with the dialogue. Like you could either be kind of a dick to this person or really nice to them, or you could fall in love with them or not. The second Mass Effect took every problem that the first one had and fixed it, but still kept the core of what Mass Effect is. Mass Effect 2 is like a perfect game because it takes everything I love about the first one and either improves it or fixes issues they had with the second one. Because for me, Mass Effect 2 is flawless. It's a flawless game. I think the MCU followed the same template. They looked at their first phase, which is fun and has a lot of heart to it.
Freshman year.
Yeah. And they said, let's fix this. Let's take the best parts of Iron Man 2 and fuse it into the MCU. Let's take the parts that maybe don't work and take those out, and we'll get a better product. And I think that's why every phase gets better and better, because they're learning their lessons.
Yeah, you're learning on the job. Yeah,
they're fixing those mistakes. Like they're not. This is why I always defend the MCU as art, because they want to tell a good story first outside of making money. I honestly think that Kevin Feige is an artist. I don't think he's like, oh yeah, I want to be number one at the box office every week. I think he wants a good story. And I think he has taken that lesson and has tried to improve on every single thing that has gone wrong. Any complaints, they're fixed. It's not like, it isn't like, God, I keep going back to Star Wars, but episode 1, everyone hears about how bad Jar Jar is. So
Misa think he's a good character.
Instead of trying to maybe fix the character to fit the plot better or have some dimension to the character or whatever, George Lucas was just like, all right, I'll just take him out of episode 2 completely. And it's like,
well, that motherfucker, didn't he become a senator or something? He failed upwards like a motherfucker.
He's a main character of episode 1. Episode 2, he becomes a complete 8-minute side character.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is Marvel does a different approach. They say, hey, maybe this aspect of Tony isn't working, or maybe this aspect of the Hulk isn't working, or Thor. I mean, Thor is a good one because Thor has gone through a complete
makeover,
because in the first one, Kenneth Branagh insisted that he have blonde, and he's a little bit too self-serious. The humor more came out of the fish out of water aspect of the movie.
Shakespearean kind of elements to it, wasn't it?
As opposed to his inherent humor, and that's a Chris Hemsworth thing. They thought, hey, what can we get out of Chris Hemsworth here? If you told me in the first Thor movie that Chris Hemsworth would actually be one of the funniest actors I've ever seen, never would have got that without some introspection on what to do. Maximize the talents that you have.
I think some people see Chris Hemsworth like, oh, he's really good looking and muscular, so he's got no chops.
Yeah,
but he's got a shit ton of chops. That's the thing. He's so funny. Like We Are the Millers, or is it not We Are the Millers? The Vacation. Do you know that? Like when he's in that, he's in the Ghostbusters one, the remake with Melissa McCarthy, and she said when he was on set, when they met him first, and he started pulling jokes, he's been hilarious, and she was like, "That's not fair. You can't be that funny." He's like, we're supposed to be the funny ones. And I just think Chris Hemsworth's the perfect example. It's kind of like on a TV series where you see an actor develop into the role over time, because the MCU is so large and so expansive. It's quite like a TV series in a lot of ways, and like if Chris Hemsworth keeps coming back, first you have him in Thor, you have him in Avengers, Thor Dark World, and he comes back and more and more they see with him as the role, they actually let more of Chris Hemsworth bleed into the Thor character. Instead of before, it was just let's shape Chris Hemsworth into a Thor character. Now it's more like let Chris Hemsworth become one with the Thor character in the same way that Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. are like so close to one another in terms of like how they are in the real world and in the MCU. That Chris Hemsworth, if you look at his interviews or you see his interactions, that he's actually a very light-hearted, funny dude. And you see that in Thor's character the more it goes on, because I think the people at Marvel and people at Disney got to know Chris Hemsworth throughout these movies and making these films, and like
maximize your talent. It's like
exactly maximize, because we always talk about waste of resources. It's so annoying. Like,
yeah,
this is what drives me nuts about the discourse about Marvel, because and even Ethan Hawke, who I really love.
Oh my god, it's Ethan Hawke.
Oh my god, it's Ethan Hawke.
It's Ethan Hawke.
I've met Ethan Hawke. He's actually a genuinely nice person.
Awesome actor.
Good to hear.
World class actor. Like,
Yeah,
and a great actor.
Great fucking
But
actor.
even he said on occasion, which is kind of ironic now because he's in a Marvel project now. But at one point he was kind of saying like, well, Marvel is kind of like the Westerns. People just do it for the money kind of thing,
Yeah.
And that's one of the arguments that drives me nuts, because they'll be like, Marvel got Chloe Zhao, so she just wanted that money, or these actors sign up because they just need that money. I don't think people give the MCU the benefit of the doubt that Kevin Feige and company, they give these actors the ability to make those characters their own. They give them the ability to let them act. They're not filling in a costume like a perfect example of this. And I recently, I never knew about this till I saw the documentary, but have either of you guys seen the Val Kilmer documentary?
No, not yet.
No, I have been.
I hear it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
just called Val or something, I think, isn't it?
Val, yes, it's called Val. I saw it in the theater, and it's a very heartbreaking movie. But this is, I don't think this is a bad movie by any means. You might disagree with me, but
Batman Forever, isn't it?
We're filming Batman Forever. He was very frustrated as an actor because and this has been a problem with me for Batman movies forever, is that all they wanted for Batman was like a pretty face and a name
to fill in. Someone fill the suit. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. Because they gave all the character beats to the villains. Like Val Kilmer was sitting there like, hey man, it was my dream to play Batman. I wanted to be Batman. Who wouldn't want to be Batman?
Who wouldn't want to be? He's right.
They literally had me standing there posing, and I was miserable. Like he talks about how it was the most debilitating acting experience of his life, because he had no say on the character. All he was doing was literally flexing and posing per the director's orders. Meanwhile, you got Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey and Nicole
Jim Carrey was just let loose on that set.
Same with Tommy Lee Jones chewing up the scenery.
Yeah. Nicole Kidman's doing this weird, sexy thing.
Like Thurman, is she in that one? No, she's Batman and Robin, isn't she?
Yeah. That's another example. George Clooney is like, I'm just George Clooney, whereas So I think this discourse that like these great actors join the MCU for the money, like, I think about the making of the first Iron Man. There's a fantastic behind the scenes documentary on that. And in it, they show Jon Favreau, Jeff Bridges, and Robert Downey Jr. And it's not like set up for the cameras or anything. They're actually reading the script together, going over the character motivations and saying like, do you think I should do this? Or like, maybe I'll walk over here. Or maybe I'll look over at this over here. So it looks like maybe I'm reflecting on something like a conversation we had off screen, off script to ourselves as characters. You know what I mean? They're actually investing their time, energy, and they get a say on their characters.
Yeah.
I have never felt like, and the reason why I've always been okay with the MCU and I love it, is I've never felt unlike maybe like a DC film where I feel like everybody's posed perfectly, or early Marvel films like Fantastic Four, it was more about the money shot. Like, how can we get the Thing to do his thing?
Yeah. Like Hulk smash, and Clobberton, exactly.
This has always felt like an artistic solution for these actors. Yes, you might have somebody like a Hugo Weaving who is like, this sucks. I did not like this experience. You might have an Edgar Wright who's like, I don't like this format of how they want to tell stories. That's totally fine. I get that. Not everyone's going to have, there's such a thing as creative differences that are purely creative differences. It's not like Edgar Wright was like, well, Marvel is this evil corporation that's denying my artistic rights. They just have different idea of how to tell a story.
And we got Baby Driver over, so we all win.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's what I think. I don't remember her name. There was kind of like Scarlett Johansson was a producer on Black Widow. She owns that character very much. So like, it's very much her character. They let her drive where that character goes. Okay. Yeah. And when she was trying to get directors for Black Widow, she was going into the indie scene, and she was getting a lot of unknown or very small known indie directors
compared to the Marvel directors.
A lot of them are TV guys.
Stratosphere directors.
Well, a lot of the Marvel guys are TV directors. You know, Joss Whedon, the Russo brothers, Andy Taylor.
Yeah, but they've done huge projects, or maybe they started their huge projects, but still. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, but this is what drove me nuts, because this is I can't remember the name of the director. She directed a lot of indie films. She said something to the degree of, well, Marvel Studios assured me that if I took care of the character beats, they'd take care of the action for me. And so all the cinema purists went nuts with that, like, oh, well, the directors really don't direct these movies. It's all the assistant directors and fight choreographers and
cinematographers and
that's what they're there for.
And I thought that was ridiculous, because I thought that the quote, she might not understand how a studio system works. I always go to Lord of the Rings, right? If anyone's watched the Lord of the Rings documentaries,
of course,
there's no doubt that movie is Peter Jackson's vision, right? Could you guys agree with that?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay. There were literally like 9 additional directors on that, in 9 different units directing different things under his guidance. But there are literally entire pockets of that movie that were directed by a different person. Okay. Because you couldn't film 9 different locations at once with one director.
Yeah.
So
time constraints as well, like, they have.
Yeah. He would trust his assistant.
It 15 years to make or something like that.
Yeah.
He would trust his assistant director to say, I need you to film this coverage, and hopefully you know what I want, so do this. It's no different on these studio pictures. Like, yeah, do I think the Russos are in the computer room, putting together all the action sequences? But people forget there's pre-visualization that the stuntmen have to do, because they have to get ready to do this. Like, they have to do it on their own to see what's physically possible.
Yes.
CGI artists have to prepare their computers to make sure they can handle the processing speed. There's this whole idea out there that
it takes a village is the expression, isn't it? It takes a village.
There's this theory out there that the directors have no vision. It's all the studio. It's this big conglomerate, this corporation. And I think when you see somebody like, back to Iron Man 2, you see like a Mickey Rourke, a Robert Downey Jr., or even Iron Man 1, the Jeff Bridges, Chris Hemsworth we were talking about in the future films.
Yeah.
They give so much character. They allow the actors to give so much of themselves into these roles. That, to me, is what acting is. That's pure. That's
a director working with an actor, and an actor working with a director. I mean, you should have that
pure collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
otherwise, you're a dude reading a script.
And just to kind of round up the Iron Man 2 talk before we go for a break and shit like that. What did you think? Like, one of the major things about Iron Man 2, we already spoke about the implications that it had in the MCU, the cast and roles, and what the characters, the decisions, all these things. But like one of the major things, something we touched upon in the Bengali episode, we talked a little bit about it, I think, in the Incredible Hulk episode, the recasting of James Rhodey Rhodes from Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle. I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but Noel, what do you think? You, like, looking back on it now, you've seen only Terrence Howard in one movie. We've got to see him in Iron Man 1. We've got to see Don Cheadle in multiple appearances as James Rhodey Rhodes, War Machine, Iron Patriot, all these different kind of iterations of the character. What do you think of Don Cheadle? What do you think he's done with the character? Do you think it was a good casting change up or whatever? And would you have liked to see Terrence Howard progress more in the role and all that jazz?
I want to go for it. I would like to see Terrence Howard. That guy just has so much charisma. I think Don Cheadle's a great actor, but just Howard
very different.
Yeah, he's just
very different.
I just liked him for the role, that way. I think Don Cheadle did a great job, but and I think he was a great casting, because obviously the one actor that it wasn't going to be was Terrence Howard. Like, if you remove Terrence Howard from the equation, I'm like, sure, Don Cheadle, that'll do nicely. But no, I would have loved to seen Howard in it, and I often think of it. I think he shot himself in the foot, maybe, you know. But yeah, no, I thought Don Cheadle did a good job, but it's not like I couldn't imagine anybody else being War Machine. Like, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man are the three, but I just couldn't imagine anybody else in the world playing them except Chris Hemsworth, Evans, and Robert Downey Jr. I don't have that. I don't have that degree of love for War Machine. I think Scarlett Johansson would be extremely.
But he's
hard
such a
to
pivotal
replace.
character in Iron Man's arc.
Yeah.
You know?
So I don't think he was. I don't look. And he had years and years in it, and I still don't think he's completely and totally irreplaceable.
Yeah.
I just don't.
It was funny. We had this conversation on the Incredible Hulk episode about Ruffalo versus Norton. I think that it's weird because, and this is not just because I'm an MCU guy, I prefer Cheadle over Howard and I prefer Ruffalo over Norton as actors in general.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I don't like the other two.
Same. Yeah. I'm on the other side of the fence, but I do agree with that.
I just think that they made the upgrades necessary in both of those cases. It is a little bit like Don Cheadle. I think the problem is that I don't know how to explain this, but I don't think War Machine was fleshed out enough in the first one to, when you have a casting change, even though you have that suspension of disbelief, you're still kind of getting to know the character. So it's a little off-putting. And I don't think Don Cheadle has ever recovered from that. And that's like a writing thing. I think he's perfect for the role. And I think once you get a good writer under him, like Shane Black, I think he's maximized. Really, Iron Man 3, I think that's when War Machine kind of became the persona we're familiar with. And, you know, he's obviously kind of a little bit more comic relief, you know, in some of the later films. You know, Joss Whedon kind of made him comic relief, and he has some great lines in Endgame, but he doesn't. Yeah,
he does get some lines finally. I remember thinking, even when he was saying them, it was like, yeah, it's nice that you're having a moment.
He was brilliant in Ant-Man, I thought. Was one of his funniest moments, when Ant-Man's fighting him.
I think regardless of...
No, it was Falcon, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Falcon, yeah.
Well, yeah, in the first...
Falcon fought Ant-Man,
yeah, my bad.
First Ant-Man, it was Falcon, yeah. I think that his character has always been a little bit thin. I don't think it's either actor's fault.
That's it. I've said that you can only work with the script you have. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter how phenomenal... Well, it does matter how phenomenal you are. Obviously, a great actor is a great actor.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, if you have the Godfather script, then great. And if you don't, and if you have Flubber, well, then it's a different story.
Flubber's a fucking masterpiece. You watch your mouth.
It's not his fault.
Watch your mouth. Oh, well, Flubber flavoured soap.
What?
Flubber's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I don't know. I went with Flubber for the sake of it.
Yeah, you went for a world-class movie. It was poor choice.
I think we talked about this in Incredible Hulk. I won't go too much back into that because you can see that episode for that. But I like Ruffalo as the Hulk because I think he does inner torture. And I can sympathize with him a lot easier than I can with an Edward Norton. So, War Machine, I think that both would have been fine to go through the entire saga. Like Terrence Howard, I would have had no problem going through the entire saga. Don Cheadle, I think, has a better relationship with RDJ in terms of comfort level and flow. And I think that the only problem is that they just never knew what to do with War Machine overall because, you know, they in Endgame, you know, in Tony's death scene, they try to play out the Iron Man arc, you know, by giving each major Iron Man character from that trilogy a moment. And, you know, first, you know, War Machine, you know, touches Iron Man's head and says, you know, Tony, you know, and then Pepper Potts and Pepper Potts comes in and Spider-Man comes in, and you kind of see all the characters that were important to his life. And regardless of how great Cheadle or even Howard would have been, I think because they kind of dropped the ball a little bit on War Machine, like that moment does not have the emotional impact it should.
No, it didn't for me either.
I think, in my opinion, that Terrence Howard shared far more chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. in one movie than Don Cheadle has done in all the following movies.
Yeah.
I think they just seemed more natural. I just think they seem like to me, Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr. seem like two actors pretending to be friends, but Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. just seem like friends.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think that's, for me, there was just a slight more natural.
Two naturally charismatic men.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
and
just
both
don't know
of
if
them,
Don Cheadle, I don't know if he has.
Yeah.
He can deliver a great line.
he's a lot more
great in-
dry, a lot more stoic.
Yeah,
There's something,
yeah.
there's a lot more withdrawn or something. He's like with a stiff upper lip, clenched jaw kind of thing. Where Terrence Howard is kind of like, I work hard during work, but I party hard during party time, and that's kind of the character he was. Like, he's always like, I work hard, I play hard, and that's always what Tony Stark was. I work hard and I play hard. Like, I might be a playboy billionaire philanthropist, all this shit, but yeah, I did just make 42 Iron Man suits.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, so, and like, I just don't see that in Don Cheadle. I don't see the fact. He just seems like a guy that works hard and goes home, probably like makes woodworking tools or some shit. I don't fucking know, but he just seems like the most boring motherfucker ever. Whereas Terrence Howard, to me, just seemed like he just really embodied what it would take to actually live amongst the Tony Stark in the real world. You know, he had that.
Cheadle was more of an army man. You know what I mean? He just
exactly. Yeah, more of a career army dude.
Career army man.
Terrence Howard is kind of like, I could have been Tony Stark, but I'm like the Tony Stark that went to work for the government.
Yeah,
you know, that kind of way.
Are either of you guys Star Trek fans at all?
I am.
I do remember you starting a Star Trek series for me when we were writing a 25YL that you did not finish, you motherfucker.
But so I think War Machine kind of goes through a Worf problem.
Yeah.
Anyone knows Worf from The Next Generation?
Of course.
I mean, we're talking about Worf was a super complex character. He was kind of an accidentally complex character. They ended up being able to write some of the greatest episodes with him because, you know, not only did the actor have a great handle of the character, but just the inherent qualities of that character, made for good storytelling.
Yeah. The Klingon race are just so interesting, though. Like, I'm not a big in-depth Star Trek guy, but what I've seen, the Klingon race to me is fucking fascinating.
Yeah. But as the series progressed, TNG, and they got back to it a little bit on DS9, like they got back to the serious Worf factor. But you would notice, and this happens a lot with TV shows, is they started to trim the edges a little bit and get him into like the basic Worf problem. You know, like where it'd be like, instead of having dimension, it was kind of like, well, Worf is the loyalty guy, the honor guy, and he cracks a good joke, good ironic joke. To the point where, like, by the time you got to like Star Trek Nemesis and Insurrection, those movies, he is literally just there to spout one-liners and be the butt of the jokes.
Any other man, I would kill you where you stand and shit like that.
It kind of became like the Ron Simmons of Star Trek.
That was the last, to me, other than Deep Space Nine, there's some good moments, but that to me is the last great Worf moment, is that if you were any other man, like that scene still gives me chills to this day.
The This Far and No Further scene from Jean-Luc Picard gives me fucking chills.
Yeah. But then Insurrection comes and they're making fun of him because he's got pimples, and Nemesis comes and he's literally just making one-liners. Deep Space Nine, they kind of like half go jokey with him, half go way over dramatic with him. I think War Machine suffers the same problem because I do agree that they fleshed him out a lot better in the first Iron Man. But what they started to do was, which is what they do not do with a lot of the other heroes, is War Machine kind of became, Don Cheadle can crack a funny joke, and War Machine's kind of a posing hero.
Yeah.
Like he has like really cool poses and stuff. And don't get me wrong, like in Civil War, Endgame, Infinity War, all these things, like Don Cheadle cracks me up. He has some of the best lines. But like I said, by the time you get to Endgame and you get to that final scene between War Machine and Iron Man, it doesn't have the emotional weight that I think they wanted to.
Yeah.
And that's because I think that they got Cheadle for what he's good at, and I think he's a better actor than Howard overall. He's just a different actor.
Yeah.
But
so different.
They sanded off the edges, took a little bit of the complexity away, played to Cheadle's like natural charisma strengths of like having good one-liners and delivery and stuff like that.
Kind of dry wit.
Dry wit's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So and they just kept, because when you think about it starts in this movie, Iron Man 2. When you think about it, there should be a lot of inherent problems between Tony and Rhodey over the paths that Rhodey takes.
Yeah.
Because for instance, like in Iron Man 2, he kind of takes the Hammer side. You know, he's like, I'm the military. We're going to go with Hammer. Like, you would think that was an inherent problem. Iron Man 3, he takes the Iron Man War Machine suit, becomes the Iron Patriot, and is basically doing missions for like the president.
Yeah. I think that's Tony choosing lesser of two evils. He's like, my technology is eventually going to get out there, and if anyone's going to take it, it will be the American government, because like the Americans, you're persistent motherfuckers, all right? So, and you're really good at getting your hands on weaponry, you know?
Yeah.
So like, he was probably like, who am I going to entrust my technology to? James Roddy Rhodes. That's the best person. Like, as Samuel L. Jackson was like, he took the suit. You tell me the brother came up in here and whooped your ass, kicked your ass, and took your suit? Like, you know, there's obviously going to be redundancies about anyone taking his technology without his permission, because he's Tony fucking Stark, you know. So I just think it was a case of him just choosing, you know.
But from the drama angle, I don't think that they played that, like, because once the shit goes down in Iron Man 2 and like all of the Hammer tech starts killing people at the expo, you know, Tony's like, I told you so. Anyway, want to go fight these guys?
Take it outside. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
didn't really have like any emotional consequences for their friendship. Like,
the tone, it never found its tone.
Wait, I want to fire two questions at you, right, before we go to the break, all right?
Sure.
You're a big Marvel dude, and you know, is that supposed to be Peter Parker at the expo? That is Peter Parker, isn't it? Confirmed.
The Iron Man cap, mask.
Yeah, the guy that nearly gets killed by the drone.
I guarantee you 100% that was not the case in the script.
100%.
But it is retroactively made canon by Feige. It's kind of like one of those things where, you know how like a character won't have a name in a movie?
Yeah.
Kid number 4.
But then like the fans will give them a name, so that becomes their name.
Yeah.
Like the original Hellraiser, his name's not Pinhead.
It's Hellpriest. Like,
that's not. Yeah, so that was one of those things where like Kevin Feige put it out there where he's like, yeah, that was Peter Parker. And now it's just lore.
And why not?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't
it's
matter.
the Wayne's World rule, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Wayne's World rule.
I know it's a small part, but we can do better. You know what I mean? Like,
because there's no defining terms to say it's not, I fully accept it as it is, and I will always tell people, hey, that's Peter Parker.
All right, and the last thing I'm going to say before the break, right, is because like one thing we love here, and I couldn't throw it to you because it was Incredible Hulk, and that motherfucker doesn't wear any suits. But something I always say right before we go to the break is, what did you think of the suits? Because I'm all about suits and power sets, something we talk about a lot, and he's going to bring out something awesome here now. Watch.
My favorite Iron Man suit of the entire Avengers thing is the suitcase suit.
Yeah, I love that suit.
So, and I have one of those Funko Pops. I don't know if you can see it, but it's the Whiplash.
That's awesome.
That's deadly.
So what we are seeing now is a Funko Pop of Whiplash doing battle with Iron Man from the scene on the Monaco racetrack.
Yeah.
Narrated that to perfection.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the color scheme of it. I love the practicality of it. It seems like
the fit of it.
Real. You know what I mean?
The fit of it. It almost nearly mimicked the race suit that he wore underneath it.
It was kind of like a downscaled one, like a little bit more flexible, probably not as powerful.
It has no guns, probably no arm.
It's very flexible, and absolutely, I love that one as well.
It has, to me, it seemed like the next logical extension for Tony Stark to make. Like, it actually makes character sense, that suit.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what if I'm abroad and something happens? Like, I'm going to need it really quick. And I love that. And they've always played with that to the extreme going forward. I just thought that was so elegant and simple. You start getting to like the Avengers where like he's landing on the roof and the machine is taking all his stuff off. And then Iron Man 3, he literally is, he's got PTSD and he's just building suits for random suits that just do random shit. And, so they went a little far with it. I think that the suitcase suit not only looks awesome, but it's just a logical, and what a hero shot. I mean, I'm not saying that the MCU should not have posing.
Yeah.
I think posing is great. Posing has gotten to the point where it's a joke within their own universe. Like Black Widow.
Disgusting. Yelena, amazing. Florence Pugh.
Yeah, I'm okay with posing as long as as long as the characters are real. It's not posing for posing's sake.
Yeah.
That shot of him putting on the suit in the suitcase on the racetrack, I mean, that's so badass. I mean, it's just so fucking cool. I mean, I love rewatching that clip. If I could ever send that gift to somebody, he's taking it apart and it's coming on his chest. It's just so cool. So cool.
Yeah, and it looks so organic the way he kind of pulls it out of the briefcase, like, you know. And but what did you think of? I trust you know. What do you think of Whiplash suit later on? War Machine, I thought was very source material accurate, and then Iron Man suit at the end.
I like the clunkier Iron Man suits because again, I think he's supposed to be wearing a weapon, and he's not as agile as Spider-Man, and
like a
he's
suit
not as strong as the
Chinese.
Hulk and whatever. He's just his whole thing is that he is wearing a weapon that he himself built. So it's his genius as he's super
Advanced prosthesis.
But I liked the suitcase suit. I liked all the suits in it. I think the only one I didn't like really was Iron Man 3 went overboard with them. And then
with the drones,
the nanotech suit, I just thought was a cop out. It just didn't feel. I don't know. I didn't. Like
but the Iron Man 2 suits.
The Iron Man 2 suit, I absolutely.
Did you like Whiplash and War Machine 2?
Whiplash was like bring out the gimp. I think.
Do you see he looked like a gimp?
Yeah, you just bring out the gimp.
Bring out the gimp from Pulp Fiction.
The Monaco racetrack, like with the guy walking there bare chested with two whips.
Yeah, but that was the whole point of the racetrack. He was never going to defeat him. Yeah. He just wanted to show that the technology is like accessible and is repeatable. Yeah. That Tony Stark is not a god. Make a god bleed. What happens? The world stops believing in him. You know, that's what the Monaco attack was all about.
Tony Stark is kind of like Steve Jobs in that not only does it have the functionality, but it has kind of the style to it, like an Apple thing.
Yeah. Elon Musk is actually in Iron Man 2. Elon Musk appears now.
Yeah, what I like about the Whiplash suit is it is like, what if you had a genius who could make this, but doesn't have like the sleek, stuff.
Like a steampunk.
And that's what I like about it, because it's like, yes, this is what a genius can do with less money, like less material. Yeah. So it kind of has this funky,
robust.
Yeah.
And it's
Soviet era. It's like, this is what the Russians made, like, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's like, it's just.
I do like that. I like the nano suit in Infinity War. I actually like the way Robert Downey Jr. looks without the helmet in the nano suit. It just kind of has I just like the way it's built. It's a cool thing. Like when he's talking with somebody with the armor on, but not the helmet, I think it actually looks pretty good. But yeah, they haven't been the same since Iron Man 2, in my opinion.
Same as. I even loved the diner scene where he's actually sitting in the suit and you can tell he's wearing that suit. You know what I mean? It just looks more real.
Practical that's him wearing a costume, and that you can feel that. Like you said, sometimes the nanotech,
that separation.
You get that. There's a moment. I love the scene, but it's always bothered me. It's that scene. It's the Who's Gamora scene in
Infinity War.
There's a moment when, like, they're all yelling at each other, and Iron Man's helmet just disappears because the nanotech.
Yeah.
And it does have that floating head effect where you're kind of like, okay, that's clearly Robert Downey Jr.'s head inside a CGI character's body. It doesn't look real.
Yeah.
It's a little off-putting.
Takes you out of it. Always takes you out of it.
Yeah.
Removes you from the immersion you've had in the world.
Because that's one thing you love about Batman. That actor's always wearing the suit.
Always wearing a suit.
Always wearing the suit. And that creates that textured reality. And like something we talked about in Iron Man 1 is Jon Favreau put up in the writer's room plausibility. And I think that's why maybe he left the Iron Man series, because he's seen that it was getting further and further away from the kind of grounded world that he'd built in the first place. Yeah. And I think that's why in Iron Man 3, Shane Black comes in and makes a horrific movie. Whatever. But I just think
another day.
I think that's why Jon Favreau left, because he felt that the tone that he had created, maybe with the Universal or Paramount, whoever released the original ones, I think he felt that tone was now going to be slowly abandoned, for lack of a better term. And then this tone that he was crafting was going to change throughout the movies in the universe. But will we get the fuck out of here for a break? So, all right, cool. So this is Dark Side of the Moon, and we'll see you after the break. Now, where's my sponsors?
I know that you've all been prepared for this, but I thought I'd just remind you just the same.
Can you handle that, Blondie?
Game over, man. Game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
It was pure evil.
I want to buy some radio ad time.
Welcome back from the break. This is Dark Side of the Moon, and so before we went to the break, we were talking about Iron Man 2, and we talked about all the different facets that made that movie what it is. And what has given it its
I'm a
place.
tiny bit sidetracked. You could probably accuse us of.
Yeah, but like that's what we always do. But so in the second half of the show, we always do the what if, and we always do best and worst, and then we get the fuck out of here. So the what if section, you know, is what if we were the directors of Iron Man 2, what we would have changed, and I'll throw it to you, Noel, and then I'll throw it to Will, and then I'll jump in after you.
I think they tried to cram a little bit too much into it. I would have liked them to tell one story well, whether it be Hammer, whether it be Ivan, or you know, focus on one thing. I think that they were spinning too many plates, and they didn't manage to keep them all spinning. I think
Dropped
they
a
dropped
few.
the ball in a few places. It didn't feel
Stop mixing your
coherent.
metaphors.
Yeah, it didn't feel coherent to me. It didn't feel like it didn't have any cohesion. And I again, if you were to come in with bullet points and like standing there trying to get the money men to back your movie, you could be like, look, and it's a story of a guy from his past, you know, who's also a genius, and he's got like, you know, the military are pressuring him for weapons, and his friend Rhodey and Hammer and all this. You're kind of going, yeah, I think you're really onto something. Like the bullet points sound impressive, and then
They sound like 4 movies.
Just the execution. So I think if I was to change anything, I would make it good.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't good.
I know. I thought it was a good movie. It's not a great movie.
It was okay. Actually, I found it very inoffensive. I just, you know, it was literally just the definition of fine.
Yeah, inoffensive apart from where Tony clearly sexually harasses Black Widow.
Yeah.
The entire movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you would, though.
You would.
You would. But
just speaking of that Black Widow thing real quick, that goes to the points I was making about the characters developing through the actors. Because, yeah, you can tell that Black Widow was kind of made in this movie to be kind of the sexually attractive
femme fatale.
Femme fatale kind of character. And eventually Scarlett Johansson was able to
flesh it out and make it her own, yeah.
Because
make it her own.
She's a world-class actor, though, Scarlett Johansson. I've said it for years.
Yeah, so exactly. So she had time to develop that. So, yeah, that's what I just wanted to say about that.
What about you? Did you put it to me as best and worst bin, or did
No, what if?
What if? Yeah. What if you're in the director's chair? What would have been different?
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit. I would try to lay the seeds of a multiverse, not a multiverse, but a expanded universe a little bit more. Maybe not. They did the right thing by keeping Hammer alive, but maybe, you know, like you said, a little overstuffed. I think pick one or the other. Like do Whiplash or do Hammer, and have the consequences be severe enough that.
Who would you have picked if you were the choice, Whiplash or Hammer?
It's so tough because
no offense, sitting here, motherfucker.
No, because the beginning portions are very successful. It's kind of like Spider-Man 3.
Oh, that's my go-to film whenever I need to reference something that's just.
He's so passionate. Like you got so angry during that episode. It was amazing.
Because in that movie, I think the Sandman stuff is brilliant. In the beginning, like I think they set up Sandman perfectly. He's got a very complex arc. You've got that situation where you are like, I'm not sure if he's good or bad.
Runs into Venom in an alleyway.
But then they have to introduce Venom, and Sandman gets put to the side. I think the same thing happens in this movie. Whiplash goes from being kind of this pseudo-sympathetic character where you can kind of understand, like, what if Tony... It's almost like the Superman Red Sun thing, where it's like, what if Tony Stark grew up in Soviet Russia, you know?
Yeah.
Best line from the movie, though, you come from a line of thieves and butchers. That's one of the best lines in the movie.
But after that scene, he kind of evolves into a generic, crazy person, and then Hammer isn't strong enough to be like the main villain at that point because they didn't develop him enough in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I don't. If I had to choose, I guess get Hammer out and go Whiplash because
more compelling.
Focus on that relationship of that hurt that is caused from generations. And I think in the end, if you did that, you wouldn't have some of that redundancy in future films of, oh, Tony Stark screwed this guy over and now he's mad. You know what I mean? So I would go with take Hammer out, and especially hindsight's 2020. Hammer has played, not that Whiplash has, but Whiplash at least the
Hammer's still there.
Still played. Like what he learns from Whiplash still plays into his character, as opposed to Hammer is inconsequential. So I'm gonna go with Whiplash.
Cool.
Yeah, and Hammer has kind of become a running joke, for lack of a better term, because it's just like Hammer tech keeps popping back up and failing throughout the year. It pops back up in Spider-Man too, and I think that's why a lot of people think Spider-Man is too intrinsically linked with the Iron Man franchise.
Yeah.
They call him Iron Boy a lot of the time online and stuff like that. I think my big what if, I won't take the easy one and say Terrence Howard coming back, because we all know I'm a big Terrence Howard fan or whatever. But my big what if, I think I would have. I should have been coming up with an answer while you were talking. But no, I think my big what if would have been, I would have liked to have seen. I don't want to. I'm trying not to tread similar ground as you, because
That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
You know, we all watched the same film and had similar kind of.
Yeah. Well, maybe a case of like just developing Venko more. I think that's kind of similar to what you said. But like, I just think like Mickey Rourke, he was at the peak of his abilities at that stage again, and I think it just made for right picking. His background is so similar to Robert Downey Jr.'s. He had a tortured past. He had addiction issues, and it was kind of like, if you want to have not the mirror image of Robert Downey Jr., but kind of like the Funhouse mirror image of Robert Downey Jr. And what would that be? And Mickey Rourke was kind of like the answer they came up with. It was kind of like, we looked at the ingredients that made Iron Man so special in its protagonist. How can we kind of recreate that in a distorted sense in its antagonist? Yeah. And that's, I think, how they landed on Mickey Rourke and is the role of Whiplash. And I would have liked to see that develop a bit more. And I think the difference I would have done, just to try to come up with a different opinion slightly than you, would be the design of the Whiplash suit at the end. I thought it was too similar to Iron Man's suit. One thing I loved about the suit at the start, it was so different than Iron Man's suit. It's a completely different interpretation of the technology that was provided to him. And I just thought that at the end, it's just another armored suit. I would have loved to have seen a bit like a bit clunkier, a bit more Soviet era, a bit more like army tankish, a bit more kind of like cumbersome and huge, like kind of like, but less. Maybe I don't know. Do you go bigger than Ironmonger? Do you go less? It's such a hard thing. What do you do?
Ironmonger doesn't bother me because it makes sense, because what do you call it? Obadiah Stane is manufacturing, like reverse engineering that from the suit,
from the Mark One.
That from the Mark One, and he's adding his own flair to it, and it still has this kind of. It's almost like, it's also like the size of Obadiah Stane's ego. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense. Yeah, the one in Iron Man 2 is a little redundant, because it's kind of like, yeah, he's just making another, like that.
Why imitate when he's supposed to be trying to do better?
Yeah.
Too different.
The Ironmonger suit makes both narrative and character sense. This one just seems like a little redundant.
Yeah, and the Iron Man 1 suit I thought as well, but Ironmonger, it's like that generation, it was always bigger is better, where the generation 20 came from is more sleek. You have the iPhone, the tablet, like the computer design, it's totally different. The size of your car, we have more sports cars now, some more supercars. Back then it was more muscle cars, and that, as you said, it made perfect sense in terms of the character and narratively to have the Ironmonger suit be kind of was it verbose, you know, that kind of like just be kind of loud in a very different way, because he came from that era of World War II, the back end of that where tanks were massive. You had a massive gun. If you needed to blow something up, you didn't make armor piercing ammo, you made a gigantic gun that just fired a gigantic shell. And that's what the Ironmonger suit was, whereas Iron Man's suit is kind of like, I'm going to make armor piercing rounds. I don't need to make a gigantic bullet. I just need to make a thing that can get through the armor and explode inside, nullifying the armor. That's the difference of the technology. You know, so I just thought that's whereas we didn't see the Russian influence in Whiplash's suit, which I thought was kind of disappointing, because at the beginning you kind of saw that Soviet era, that kind of
he was
Russian,
in it for like 4 fucking minutes. You know?
Yeah, but you know, at the start that suit he had was very bare minimum.
Yes.
And I would have liked to seen the suit, the armor later on be a little bit more bare minimum or slightly different, or just a different take, a Russian version. Like something I mentioned to you before we started recording was like, I'd love to see I think I said it to you, was a Japanese Iron Man, and what the Japanese technology would look like when implemented into that suit, because I think it'd be very different, maybe samurai-esque or something. You could play with like lightning swords or something, and I just think we didn't see enough of that difference in Whiplash's suit. But I think that'd be
like, as long as it doesn't look like the suit at the end of the Wolverine. Samurai adamantium suit or whatever the hell that was.
I
mean, I actually don't mind that movie that much.
It just
That at the end is like too far.
yeah.
Overshot the mark completely.
Yeah, it was like Jane Shredder.
Giant Shredder is exactly what
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
super Shredder.
Super Shredder, yeah. It was played by Kevin Nash in the original.
Actually, speaking of how bad that was, it does kind of lend itself to the best and worst question.
Yeah, best. So Will, I said the what if to Noel first. So when you look at the Iron Man experience, what is your best and what is your worst? Or Iron Man 2 experience, sorry. What do you take from that movie? And what is your best from that and what is the worst?
I know this is cheesy, but it's such a to me it is so emotionally powerful, and this is why another reason why I defend against the cinema people that say like these films have no characters. The scene with Howard Stark, you know, kind of the old Walt Disney footage kind of thing, where he says, "My greatest creation is you." Is I still to this day, since that movie came out, I actually send that gift to my daughter sometimes.
Yeah.
Just to be like, because it'll be like, you know, my greatest invention was you. Like, that is something that not only the character needed, but like the great thing about the script, and they reference it in Iron Man 1, and they double down on it in this one, is that like Tony's got daddy issues, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that gets resolved in a effective way, and I don't think it's cheesy. It's cheesy that I send the gift to my daughter, but I don't think it's cheesy film. To me, that's one of my.
The guy from Mad Men plays his father. What's his name?
Yeah, John Slattery.
John Slattery.
Yeah, when I was writing for 25YL, I actually, before Endgame came out, I actually did top 10 moments from the MCU up to that point, and I had that in there. Because I just love that moment. It's so essential to the character. Downey Jr. just acts the hell out of that. I mean, like that's how you know you got a good actor, when you know you can read what they're thinking in their eyes.
Yes,
still taking me to school, Dad. Wasn't that what he said to him? Dead 20 years and you're still taking me to school.
Yeah.
Still school. You know what I mean? Like, it just shows that he has a complete admiration for his father.
And despite how narcissistic he can be, that
he's his father's son.
He has,
you know?
heroes as well. Like,
yeah.
And
it's a nice answer for best. It's a nice
even
answer.
though I like the scene in Endgame where Tony gets to finalize that stuff with his dad, you know, because John Slattery's a great actor too. Like he's a great, like he knows how to play people. Like he's like, when you watch Mad Men, I mean, he is kind of like Robert Downey Jr. too. He's this kind of very slick, sarcastic, overconfident person.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
It was perfect casting. And though I like it in Endgame that they get a moment where like Tony gets to say goodbye, and you know it's kind of setting up the fact that Tony's going to die.
Yeah.
If they never touched on it again, this would have been the perfect end to that whole arc about his father. Like, because it's just so powerful.
Sharing that bond through their love of technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been totally fine if they never brought up the father again, because we would have got all the closure and character development we needed. And so that is my best for sure from this movie. I take that away wherever I go.
And what's your worst?
Flip it. It could be something super, like you went with just a kind of a very small scene for your best. It could be something superficial. You know, you hated the suit. Well, we know you like the suit. But.
I enjoy this scene because it's ludicrous, and it may be a very obvious answer, but yes, the bird sequence is stupid.
Yeah, I wanted my bird.
Because
bring me my bird, William. Bring me my bird.
Because we have
and scene.
We have this very bizarre, like, I don't know how to explain. This is what's so weird to me. And I guess it's a Hammer wanting to be a Stark thing, but this isn't very Starky. But like, there's a moment where like Hammer's like in an airport hangar with like fine dining.
He's eating ice cream.
Like,
there was an odd scene.
That was because there was a film with Meryl Streep has a similar scene, and Sam Rockwell wanted to recreate that scene.
Okay. Because it just feels so weird, because this should be the moment where our two villains who have these issues with our main character, you know, should be having this bonding moment, or like even if they have tension with each other, that's fine. But it devolves into this like he's a goofball, and then you got Whiplash being a goofball, and it's just this goofy. It takes all of any kind of character they built up with Whiplash having this actual motivation, and just turns it into this bizarro comedy scene that takes away any bite from either of them.
Like an Odd Couple type moment.
Yeah.
So it that scene is so unnecessary. It actually kind of kills the enemy momentum.
Yeah.
In the end, I don't care if either of them die at that point. I'm just like, whatever.
Oh yeah, I didn't care. I checked out. I definitely checked out with that.
Yeah.
That
was definitely a turning point in the film, I think.
Okay.
What's your best and worst?
My best is simply Robert Downey Jr. He was just fantastic in this. Like he actually, he just the torture of being that kind of genius. I actually just thought he was just excellent in the film. And of course, that's a bit of a cop-out because it's Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man. It's well established that he's an absolutely phenomenal actor, especially phenomenal Iron Man. But I just thought he this film was entertaining because he was in it. And I'm talking about Tony Stark. I could have taken or leaving Iron Man. You know what I mean? I thought the fight scenes were like over the top and kind of, I don't know, they didn't have any gravitas. But if I was to say with the worst, I would just have to go the antagonist, just to flip it. And it's not against the actors. It was two badly fleshed out characters instead of one good.
The two antagonists you didn't like, Whiplash and Justin Hammer.
No, it's not. Yeah, neither of them were fleshed out enough for them to have any kind of.
And two really top level actors. Sam Rockwell, amazing actor. And Mickey Rourke, a great actor in his day.
They did two things wrong, and they should have done one thing right. And that's something that we seem to have consensus about. So I'm going to use that for my answer.
So I think the best thing I thought about Iron Man 2 is the world building, because just little bits of world building here and there, and I love subtle world building, and especially the introduction of Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, because she became such a pivotal character throughout Captain America, the Avengers movies.
And she wasn't hinted at; she was in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I love Scarlett Johansson. I think she's actually a great actor. Like, aside from the fact that she's aesthetically like stunning or whatever, she is actually an amazing actor. And I just defer to anyone to just go watch her. The movie where she doesn't actually appear physically in the movie, but she owns the entire movie with her and Joaquin Phoenix, and it's just an amazing movie, and it just proves to anyone that like she's far more than the cosmetic beauty. And that's what at the start it's just like they showed the cosmetics side. It's kind of like what the world, how they perceive Scarlett Johansson, and it's the same way Robert Downey Jr. perceives her, and then you see the layers to Natasha as it goes on. It's kind of like the way you see the layers of Scarlett Johansson as her career is developed. And that's one thing I love about it. And then you see later on as well, it's like the kind of like a side moment where you go, Nick Fury's like, you're not the biggest thing that's happening now even in the Southwest or something, or I've got bigger issues than you in the Southwest, where he's hinting at Thor's hammer falling from the heavens or whatever. So I just love the little tidbits of world building that they just kind of placed here and there, that we knew that they were hinting at things, but wasn't
touched on, like Wakanda being on the map.
Exactly. Little Easter eggs that Marvel have become well known for, renowned for, that they do that sort of world building better than anyone. It's the reason like Universal's Monster Multiverse didn't work, and it's the reason why ECU didn't work, because they just tried to rush. Whereas Marvel do subtle world building and introducing characters like Natasha Romanoff became the Black Widow. We see Justin Hammer, who had a smaller role, but Hammer Tech is out there now, and it just shows the different kind of iterations and the different ways that the world is going to develop throughout the following movies. And I just like even though Iron Man 2 is a lot weaker than Iron Man 1, like we can't deny that. But there is elements there that are very redeemable, and I think one of them is the world building and definitely the introduction of Black Widow. And the worst thing about it, I think, I just think there was just too many cooks in the oven, or too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many cooks in the kitchen. I just think, like, when you look back over it, trying not to be repetitive, but there's too many villains.
Your worst is similar to my worst. Your worst is similar to my worst.
Yeah, it's just too many villains in the movie, I think. Like, and that's normally the case in the third movie in the trilogy, where you get that bloated kind of villains where you need like, this villain, you have to retcon this. And sometimes when you have too much backtracking in the story, it distracts from what's going on. And I think Eternals, even though it was a good movie, it was suffered from that because there was so much exposition and so much backstory they had to make that it distracted from the Icarus of it all, or the main storylines that are happening right now in present day. I think with Iron Man 2, it's a bit retrospective at times. And that's maybe the worst thing about it at times. But I love the scenes with John Slattery, like Will spoke about. I love to see the developments in the technology. But one thing I really hate about the Iron Man franchise is the ARC technology is not attainable by anyone until we need a new villain. And then all of a sudden it's out there, and it's super repeatable, you know, that kind of way. And that just annoys me that, like,
mass manufactured even.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, and I just think that sometimes something I spoke about, the super soldiers and the Black Widows and the widows themselves, the more of it that there is. You take away the specialness of the character, and I think the fact that anyone could replicate the arc reactor in such a close time from Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, and you had some of the best scientists that were working in Stark Industries that said that they couldn't do it. Yeah, I'm not Tony Stark. Tony Stark did this in the cave. I'm not Tony Stark, you know. So it just shows, it takes away from the specialness of Tony Stark's genius a little bit, I think, having Whiplash having the same technology, but also shows that Whiplash himself is a genius.
Yeah, good. All right.
Could I just do a side thing real quick? Because you were mentioning Black Widow.
Yeah.
And this was the beginning. Usually every character in every movie, no matter what, even if it takes place like the next day, they always get something modified to their uniform or costume. This, I'm going to say right out the gate, is one of my favorite Black Widow hairstyles. Where do you guys it's on the Black Widow hairstyles?
Yeah, it's like, it's the most comic accurate, I think, of all of the portrayals of Black Widow.
The curls, they look fantastic.
Yeah. She looked like she would lift it straight off the page.
Yeah.
Yeah, my second favorite is probably the straight hair from Winter Soldier, and then I do like the blonde.
Scarlett Johansson's just flawless.
Yeah,
she really is. Though. She had purple hair. Yeah. Check. You know what I mean?
I know it's shallow, but I love her look in this film. We're talking about how great of an actress she is, and great character and everything, and it's true, but she is also gorgeous.
Exactly. But superhero movies are very aesthetics based. They need the cool suits.
Henry Cavill is a very good looking dude. Chris Hemsworth is a very, very good looking dude.
Exactly, and he looks cool as Thor.
Yeah.
He needs that look to be Thor in the same way Scarlett Johansson needs that look to be Black Widow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So aesthetics are hugely important in superhero movies. Especially when you're capturing source material that really already exists.
Yeah.
Because you need to capture the character from the page, you know?
It'll be my best A. 1A. Scarlett Johansson's amazing curly hair in this. She looks absolutely stunning in that final scene where she's taking everybody down like a badass. Yeah. It's so badass that I think they still use clips of that. I'm not sure. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure they still use a clip of that in the Marvel logo, like the Marvel Studios logo.
When she's doing the Hurricanrana, is it the head scissors?
I still think they have a clip from that.
Yeah, it was great,
That's how badass that scene is. It's fantastic.
I love the way, they kind of just turn it on its head. Instead of like back in the day, be a woman fighting one woman, a guy takes out 12 dudes. Jon Favreau. That's what I love about him as a director. He loves to have a bit of fun, and it's him, like the director. He picks, I'm going to be the dude fighting one guy for like 5 minutes, when she takes out like a dozen dudes. Amazingly.
I got him.
Sure. And I love the way you get to see the wide range of Black Widow's technology and her little gadgets and stuff, and her, mixed with her martial arts.
Yeah, absolutely. Infiltration.
So we get the fuck out of here. And so, Will, before we go, I wanted to say one last thing. So would you say Iron Man 2 has aged well throughout the past decade?
I think in terms of the way that the MCU was built, I think in terms of the Phase 1 movies, is it the best film? No, I would probably give that to either Iron Man 1 or Captain America, the First Avenger. But I think it was ahead of its time in terms of how to properly tell a singular story within an expanded universe. Yeah. So I actually...
Whilst expanding the universe as well.
Yeah, and I think while I've... Like when I do rewatches and stuff, like with my daughter and things, when we go in chronological order or order of the release, I should say, I am never bored, and I think that it fits in well with what the MCU would become, regardless of the story limitation. So I think it's aged really well. It fits in perfectly. It's like to me, it's like reading. Yeah,
it does have that Marvel blueprint.
Yeah, has that aged well for you too? No.
Yeah, I think it has. I really do think it has. And I know I was quite hard in the film, but I do think it doesn't. It feels like it could have been in Phase 2 if they wanted to. You know what I mean? Iron Man had very much so arrived. So I do think it's like...
There has been weaker sequels in the MCU.
Yeah, exactly. There has been weaker
sequels. In hindsight, there has been like Thor Dark World, even like you'll admit maybe Ant-Man 2 was as a weaker sequel than the first outing. Like,
again, we got a head shake there for another day too.
So Will, you're going to come back for the Ant-Man trilogy without a doubt. That's been predestined. And so Will, thanks for coming on again.
For coming on, Will.
And this was Dark Side of the Moon, nearly said. said invasion of potty snatchers again. Fucking hell, October. But this is the too professional.
Super professional.
Super professional. But this is Dark Side of the Moon. I'm your host, Vincent Green.
I'm your host, Noel John Dewey.
We got Carmack in the back. That's Will Johnson. Will, thank you so much for coming on. See you next time, motherfuckers. Peace out.